Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into a really short but incredibly explosive period in history. We're looking at Jamaica, specifically the 6 years between 1938 and 1944.
Yeah.
And this is a story of, well, everything converging. Political awakening, a total economic overhaul, and a global war, all crashing together on one small island.
That convergence is what makes these 6 years just so fascinating.
Right. So let's start at the beginning of this period, 1938. What was the mood on the island?
To understand 1938, you have to realize that Jamaica was simmering. The sources we have just paint this picture of deep structural frustration.
Right.
The colonial economy was, well, it was designed to extract as much value as possible and give as little as possible back to the laborers.
So we're talking stagnant wages, terrible working conditions.
Brutal conditions. And all political power was held by this tiny, wealthy elite. And then the Great Depression comes along and just makes a fragile situation 10 times worse.
It's that classic story, isn't it? When people feel like they have nothing left to lose, their options suddenly become much more radical. The sugar and banana industries were making money for the owners, but none of it was trickling down.
Not at all. That exploitation basically created a powder keg.
And what lit the fuse?
The fuse was lit in Westmoreland at the Frume Sugar Estate. The workers there were just stretched past their breaking point, so they walked off the job.
Just like that.
Just like that. It wasn't really a planned political revolt at that point. It was just pure exhaustion turning into defiance.
But it became something more.
It did. The moment the colonial authorities tried to crush it with force.
Which always backfire.
It always backfires. That use of force, which led to injuries and death, transformed a local strike into a national uprising almost overnight.
Wow. So it just spread like wildfire.
Completely.
Yeah.
Kingston's dock workers, who were so vital to the island's trade, they walked out. Then you had the banana laborers in Portland join them, then sugar workers all across Clarendon.
So this was the moment the working class sort of realized their own power.
Their shared power, exactly. And that raw energy, it created a vacuum for leadership. And into that vacuum stepped two giants of Jamaican history.
Let's start with Alexander Bustamante. What was his deal?
Bustamante was the populist, the firebrand. He was on the streets, leading the workers in Kingston. He was the voice people could hear, someone who just fearlessly confronted the authorities.
And he was demanding immediate changes.
Immediate concessions, better wages, better conditions right now. His power came from his charisma and his willingness to get arrested for the cause. That just made him a hero.
Okay, so that's one side. Who was the other?
Norman Manley. A totally different character. He was a brilliant, highly respected lawyer, and he was much more focused on the long game.
So while Bustamante is in the streets,
Manley is in the back rooms, negotiating, focusing on constitutional reform. He understood that a wage increase could be taken away, but if Jamaicans controlled the government itself, the ballot box, then the change would be permanent.
so the tension there is fascinating, isn't it? You have the immediate demand for economic justice from Bustamante running alongside Manley's push for the political tools to make that justice last. Did they clash?
Oh, they absolutely clashed, personally and tactically, but they were also two sides of the same revolutionary coin, and they managed to channel the chaos of 1938 into something lasting.
How so?
Well, Bustamante quickly founded the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, the BITU. That institutionalized the labor movement.
Give it a formal structure.
A permanent one. And Manley followed that by launching the People's National Party, the PNP, which focused squarely on that fight for self-governance.
And this is really the key takeaway from that moment. The BITU and the PNP, for the first time, were these mass movements that truly represented the majority and that put the country on a one-way path to independence.
An irreversible path.
So if 1938 was the scream of protest, then 1944 was a formal reply. The uprising had fundamentally broken the old relationship with Britain.
It did. The Crown realized that just suppressing unrest wasn't going to work anymore. The cost was too high, especially with a world war going on. They needed loyalty.
They needed the colonies to be stable.
Precisely. So to stabilize things, they had to grant real political power. And that led to the landmark constitutional change in 1944, universal adult suffrage.
Now, the term suffrage is one we all know, but the scale of the impact here is just... It's hard to overstate. This wasn't some minor reform.
No, it was revolutionary.
Suddenly, every single Jamaican over the age of 21, man, woman, regardless of race, property, wealth, could vote. Think about what that means. The old rich planter class instantly lost its monopoly on power.
Overnight, The future of the island was now in the hands of the majority, the very same laborers who had been rioting just 6 years earlier.
It's a seismic shift, and it leads to the first general elections under this new system.
Right. And the contest was immediately between the two parties born from that labor struggle. You had the Jamaica Labor Party, the JLP, led by Bustamante.
And they were focused on immediate workers' rights, direct action.
Very grassroots. And then you had Manley's PNP, still focused on achieving full self-governance as fast as possible.
And so same end goal, independence, but very different ideas on how to get there.
And different immediate priorities. And the JLP won that first election.
Which just says a lot, doesn't it?
It speaks volumes about the power of that newly enfranchised working class and about Bustamante's populist appeal. Now, the British governor still held a lot of executive power, but the creation of an elected House of Representatives meant the people finally had a real voice in their own government. The era of pure colonial rule was over.
And this political empowerment, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. The sources show that other communities on the island were also solidifying their roles.
Absolutely. Chinese Jamaicans were strengthening their hold on retail and grocery trades. They became vital small business owners.
Mm-hmm.
Indian Jamaicans were becoming much more visible in politics, pushing for more economic inclusion. And the Syrian and Lebanese communities really established their dominance in things like wholesale and textiles.
So suffrage created this kind of foundational stability, allowing all these different groups to strengthen their positions, knowing the political ground was finally shifting toward local control.
It was empowerment across the board, and all of this is happening while the world is at war.
Right. It's so crucial to remember that this entire domestic political drama is unfolding with the backdrop of World War II. And Jamaica, though it was far from the battlefields, played a huge role.
A truly immense role. You can see it immediately with the formation of the Caribbean Regiment in 1944. This was a dedicated fighting force with volunteers from all over the British West Indies.
Including a lot of Jamaicans.
A large contingent. And their deployment to North Africa and the Middle East wasn't just symbolic. It was an active, visible commitment of manpower to the war.
But their service went way beyond just the regiment. We often forget the sheer numbers. Over 3,700 Jamaicans volunteered for the Royal Air Force, the RAF.
Which is an incredible number.
It is. And these weren't just ground crew. Many were pilots, mechanics, and they distinguished themselves, earning commendations for bravery.
And you can't forget the sea. Jamaican sailors in the Navy and the Merchant Marines took on enormous risks. They were the lifeline, really.
How so?
They were transporting goods and military supplies across the Atlantic, facing a constant threat from German U-boats. They were literally keeping Britain fed and armed.
And back on the home front, the island itself was a vital asset.
Essential for resources. Sugar, of course, but also bauxite. Bauxite was critical for aluminum, which means almost every Allied aircraft had a direct link to Jamaican soil. The island also hosted Allied military bases and training facilities.
There was also a really significant humanitarian part to this, which connects to a much longer history for the island.
That's right. The establishment of Gibraltar Camp, which was on the Mona Estate where the University of the West Indies is now.
Okay.
That camp housed about 1,500 evacuees. Some were from Gibraltar, but critically, it also became a refuge for Jewish people fleeing persecution in Europe.
And that's important to stress. I mean, the Jewish community had been part of Jamaica since the 16th century, first as conversos, and then settling openly after 1655.
Exactly. They were always a major part of the island's commerce and trade. So the fact that Jamaica opened its doors to refugees during the war, it reinforces this long historical identity as a place of refuge. It wasn't random.
It was an integrated part of their global role. But here's the irony, right?
The complex irony. Jamaican soldiers return home after fighting for democracy abroad.
Only to find the same old colonial structures and economic inequality they'd left behind.
And their sacrifice only strengthened the demand for full, immediate independence. There was no going back.
But the war had an unintended consequence, an economic one. The American military presence, it led to massive infrastructure improvements.
Completely transformative improvements. It was a trade-off, really. Military necessity accidentally planted the seeds for the tourism industry.
Can you give us some concrete examples?
Sure. Think about logistics. The U.S. needed major hubs, so they expanded and modernized airstrips and ports. Those military landing strips in Montego Bay and Kingston, they became the foundation for commercial air travel after the war.
I see.
And new, durable roads were built to connect coastal towns to military bases. That created the essential grid for future tourist transport.
It's fascinating how quickly a military asset could become a leisure asset. The American soldiers and officials stationed there were, in a way, the first modern tourists.
That's a great way to put it. They experienced the island not just as a colonial outpost, but as a place for, relaxation. And when they went home,
They became accidental evangelists for this new industry.
exactly, they sparked that initial interest that really ignited the post-war tourism boom.
So by 1945, the long-term shift is undeniable. Jamaica is moving away from being just a plantation economy.
Decisively. That new infrastructure fueled the development of luxury hotels. It shifted the island's focus toward a much more diversified economy, one linked to international travel, not just sugarcane.
So when you step back and look at that narrow 6-year window, the whole story snaps into focus. That convergence in 1944 is the hinge.
It is.
You have the internal force of universal adult suffrage giving power to the masses. That meets the global validation of their service in World War II. And all the while, the island's economic engine is being quietly redesigned by the needs of that war.
In essence, the period between 1938 and 1944 didn't just lead to political self-rule, it forged the dual foundations of the modern Jamaican state.
The democratic framework for 1962 and the tourism-focused economy.
Both were born in that period. It really proves that major systemic change often needs that internal grassroots combustion and a global external crisis to happen.
So here's something for you to mull over. The 1938 riots were about economic justice in a plantation economy. The reforms of 1944 gave that working class the vote. Yet the parallel economic shift, driven by the war, ushered in a totally new industry, tourism, which created new wealth, but also new kinds of labor dependence. So what is this transition from the plantation to the global leisure destination? Now tell us about how newly won political power interacts with, and is maybe even limited by, powerful new economic forces. It's a question that continues to shape the island's legacy.